Corporation Counsel and Special Counsel for the Commission. I'm going to ask Mr. Gottschalk to please answer I'm going to ask Mr. Gottschalk to please explain what came out of our deliberations in the council chambers.
It's a suggestion to you, and it kind of abbreviates the process, or streamlines it rather, in an attempt to avoid multiple special meetings by the Common Council. Again, you have 15 days to make recommendations. The Commission then is to confer with the Common Council and issue a final report within 30 days. And then the Commission, and then the Common Council has 15 days to accept or reject in various forms. One way to approach this is for you to hash out the questions, the issues tonight, with the idea that your final decision with respect to recommendations will then take less time and will occur on the night of your presently scheduled special meeting on the 17th? On the 17th. The next step is this conference. The statute doesn't describe the nature of the conference, but it seems perfectly reasonable to have a group of council members, majority and minority leader, and frankly any other interested council members, come to a Charter Revision Commission meeting and confer with the Charter Revision Commission with the idea that then the Commission would be in a position to issue its final report prior to your March meeting. It's a condensed version of the longest possible sequence of events that the statutes allow us, but it works, or could work, certainly.
Mr. Perkins?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Counsel, you said hash out. Does that mean we construct a language on the proposed changes this evening?
That's your choice. You may simply identify the issues and put your recommendations in any form you like. You could say revisit the bonding issue with the desire on the part of the Common Council to reduce those limits. That would be a recommendation. Or you could say, we recommend that you reduce the bonding limits to $1 million per project and $2 million in any given fiscal year. Or substitute whatever numbers you like.
But it would be in the form of recommend.
Yes. All the statutes requires that you either make recommendations or you don't. It doesn't describe the nature of the text, the format of these recommendations. That's up to you.
So the language needs to be very specific.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying you may choose to make it specific, or you may choose to make it general.
Mr. Gottschalk, you say I would like to refer this back to the Charter Revision Commission for further review, and leave it as vague as that, referring to the bonding issue.
If you were to describe the issue and say for further review, that's a recommendation. It doesn't provide much guidance, but it's a recommendation.
Could I say, take a look at 6.3 and revisit the language? I mean, can I be that general?
I think you can.
Thanks, Mr. President. Just to clear my mind, are we formulating the questions that would go to the voters tonight?
No. After the final report is issued, then the final report of the Charter Revision Commission back to the Common Council, then you will vote to accept or reject or anything in that draft report. You could jettison particular sections, accept the whole thing, throw out the whole thing, and then decide how it's to be presented to the voters and when. Well, I'm making an assumption that it will be next November, but it doesn't have to be. It can be any time within 15 months. and in one or more questions.
To the chair of the Corporation Council. Let me understand, the expedience here comes not by changing really the procedure, but somewhat of an agreement by the council, not if it came up on the meeting of the 17th, that we wouldn't get into any great debate at that time. We would take the recommendations that come out of this committee and just adopt those recommendations and send them back to the Charter Revision Commission. So you're really going back to the governing body. But it's a kind of an informal type of thing. The members here would make their recommendations tonight and we could speed it up.
That was the recommendation.
So we're not really changing a lot, just...
No, we've had committees of the whole before, and that's what they tend to do. They make recommendations back to the council, and the council usually approves them, since they are you.
Mr. Sadi?
Procedurally would, in order to express the recommendations of the council tonight, it can be general, it can be specific. Can it be in the form of a motion to recommend, or at the will of the council, and to put it to a vote? So I would move to recommend X, Y, and Z, and there's a second. That would be acceptable, wouldn't it?
That would be accepted, certainly.
Mr. Trevetta?
I'm a little bit confused. The recommendation of the council, but there's 19 of us here. How, the committee, there's 19 of us here tonight. Are we supposed to get together and banter back and forth and come up with one recommendation, for instance, term limits or whatever, and we agree as a body and then recommend it as a body?
Yes. The statutes describe two entities. One is the Charter Revision Commission, and the other is the council.
So then we all, 19 members, have to agree on a recommendation.
Not all, just as to be a majority.
Majority vote, like you do with everything. Yes.
Any other committee meeting you have, same thing.
That's like an add-on. Say we're going to be here for.
Yeah.
Procedural question?
Okay. There's a lot of meetings here. We send this back to the Charter Corporation Council. We send this back to the council on the 17th. At least that's the general idea. It's some meeting within the next 15 days.
Yes.
At that point, let's just assume for the sake of argument that there will be changes, there will be a recommendation of changes. So we'll
Yes.
be giving a document back to the Charter Revisions Commission, CRC, with the stipulation that they revisit some of these items, which they then do.
Yes.
Or they don't. I mean, whatever they do, they do, not us. We've asked them to do something and they can then do it or not. So let's just assume again that they actually do something and come back with another document.
Yes. Final report.
Is that a new document?
Yes.
Is it recommitted? Does it start the
No.
process all over again?
No. The statute is clear that you must have a draft report. You've gotten that now. And that then the council has the opportunity, but not the obligation, to make recommendations. If you choose not to make recommendations, the draft report becomes the final report. If you choose to make recommendations, then the commission considers them, can accept them or reject them, but in either case has 30 days to issue a second document called the final report.
And then if I may continue, the only thing we could do at that point would be to amend that document or break it up for the voters or do things so that we can't even...
You don't amend it. You accept it. You accept it or any of its parts. Thank you.
Okay, so we can amend it, but we could delete sections.
Up or down.
So it's up or down vote on the changes. We can make amendments at that. We can amend it kind of tonight with these recommendations.
That's correct.
Once it comes back, it's an up or down vote on the separate issues, should we so choose.
Correct.
Clear on procedure?
We will have to, Mr. Chairman, we'll have to renotice
The meeting of the 17th.
and we'll add on this item to this, as we the 17th should be some of the functions identified in
Okay, Mr. Scott, thank you. Don't go too far. Okay. We can now open the meeting. Who would like to start? Mr. Sadi, would you?
Nobody's volunteering?
Mr. Perkins? I'm opening the committee again, so. Mr. Perkins?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to keep the term limits to 2 years. Can I do that?
Put that in the form of a motion. I didn't hear if it was in the form of a motion. I'm sorry.
Make a motion to recommend to the Charter Revision Commission that we keep the terms at 2 years and not 4.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded by Mr. Esposito or Mr. Cheney. I'm not sure. I didn't catch Mr. Cheney. Okay. Under discussion on the motion to keep the term of office 2 years. Mr. Kern.
My feeling on this is that I believe that we should separate the term one, be one of the ones separated in a referendum, and let the public vote on whether to go 4 years or 2 years. We've got, not that we're going to be, we have nothing to lose, because if they don't want it, they want it to stay the way it is, then let them have that choice. I don't see the problem with just let it stay in the charter revision, but put it as a separate vote at the vote time of voting.
Mrs. McMahon?
I also agree with Councilman Kern. I think it should go to the voters, and that's my opinion.
Thank you, Mrs. McMahon.
Point of order.
Mr. Stein?
Through the chair of the Corporation Council, because we're going to have several different issues before us in succession, almost a laundry list of things. Generally, and correct me if I'm wrong, the limitation of whoever wants to answer, the limitation on individuals speaking. I'm concerned that the limit, if it's 2 times that a person can speak, that I was going to ask that.
I think I'm going to grant latitude tonight.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask.
The complexity of the issue, I think I'll just grant some latitude on that.
So we can speak multiple times. Thank you.
But I think what we should do now is, I think one of the things we should stick to is term limits. And I think we should get that issue resolved on where we want to go with that. Then we can move on to the next issue that comes up after that. But I think once term limits are addressed, I think we should leave it as addressed term limits. Mr. Cheney?
Through the chair to the actual Charter Commission. Through the 17 months since you were a body, I didn't hear a lot of my constituents come to me saying we got to have 4 years or we got to have 2 years. What items came before you to make you determine that a 4-year term is needed? The things that you wish to share to this body here to make you come up with that conclusion?
Mr. Morano, would you like to come and field that question? You can certainly come right up here to use the microphone for the benefit of our viewers at home, as well as those of us that are hard of hearing.
I'm Carlo Morano, and I was, or still am, chairman of the Charter Revision Commission. 4-year terms was really something that we heard from on several occasions, and it was controversial. There is no question about that. But as we looked at the way the capital budget in the city was set up, the fact that it was hard sometimes to bring bonding before the public during election years and things, and as the city itself seems to be growing and becoming more complex, we just had a lot of feedback that 4-year terms would make some more sense so that people would have longer terms in office, could take a longer view of the issues at hand, and that they felt it would be a little bit more efficient form of government. Nothing special about that.
Mr. Cheney, does that answer your question? Thank you, Mr. Morano. Mr. Stein?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really can't disagree more with those who think that we should just send this either as a whole document to the voters or that right now we should decide whether or not 4 two-year terms is a good issue, all due respect to my fellow council members, based on the possibility that we might separate this question out. We can't decide that tonight as to how to separate these questions out. We're deciding on these recommendations. When the documents come back, as council explained, then we can decide to separate them out. I would support the limit to 2-year terms. We've had many successful mayors. We have many people re-elected time and time again, and have functioned with continuity in their administrations. Just at this level of government, and even look at our state legislature, our House and Senate, they're every 2 years. I think those that spoke and said that we're expected to sort of get our feet wet very quickly in this job, that's true, and we need to do that, and I think all of us have done that. So I strongly oppose increasing this to 4-year terms and support the motion. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I just interject here? You could, depending on what happens to Mr. Perkins' motion, somebody could make a motion tonight to recommend splitting the question.
Recommend.
Yeah, it would be a recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to speak to the 4-year term and the idea of splitting the question. The idea of splitting the question, it becomes a difficult one. I attended many of the Charter Revision Commission meetings, and the things that the public doesn't understand, and that's why they elect us to understand all of the ramifications involved here. Things like, in this state, we have no recall provision. And one of the first things out of the mouth of all of those city leaders that have been indicted around the state, just as in Hartford, is, I will not resign. And that means that litigation has to continue on for 4 years, and the taxpayers are left, the citizens are left behind because they don't understand that there is no recall provision that we can take people out of office. As a matter of fact, I think in the case of Bridgeport Joe Ganim, they had to pay him off to get him out, to get him to resign because he was for 4 years, as well as in Waterbury, 2 of the mayors there were paid off for sick time and sick leave. So that dividing the question and getting into all of the nuances, the public is not aware of what they'd be voting on. I initially was very much in favor of extending the term to 4 years. But when I understood about, first of all, we don't have anything in our Constitution that allows for term limitations, so you couldn't have a mayor and elect them for 2 terms and say, well, he's reached the maximum. A mayor could stay in office for 15, 20 years very easily and continue to build a political base that would be very difficult to overcome. And I think we've dealt with 2-year terms in Danbury for a number of years, and I think that it served us well, and we ought to continue. Most other branches of government are 2 years. Congress members, the only ones are senators, and they're 6 years, and that's too bad. But most other office holders, it's a 2-year term. And I think, like I said, we shouldn't divide any of this charter. It should be the whole or none. When we, as a body, should work out the good points and the bad points and make our recommendations to the public, which they put us here for, based on our understanding of what's in their best interest.
Thank you, Mr. Levy. Mr. Ortell?
Thanks, Mr. President. You know, the constituents didn't send us up here to turn around and send stuff back to them every 5 minutes. I mean, we have a recommendation tonight to go to 4 years. With all due respect, committee to revise the charter, I have not had a constituent talk to me about extending term lengths ever, and I've been in public office in Danbury since the 90s. Sometimes they actually talk about shortening limits, as we heard tonight. But without being facetious about this, there's a couple of structural issues with 4-year terms that we don't really bump into too much with 2. A couple have been mentioned already this evening. Term limits, recall provisions that are non-existent within a 4-year term or even within a 2. The ability to, a particular philosophy that I have, that the closer you are to your constituents, the shorter your term should be. There's some precedent for having a 6-year term with a senator, only 100 of them, and they, represent 300 million people in the entire country. You're on the student council, maybe you ought to get reelected every 9 months. But somebody who is essentially a ward boss in Danbury has no excuse to require a 4-year term. You can make a case about a mayor. They're wearing 2 hats. They're the political head of the city, and they're also the city manager. And in Danbury, we don't separate those 2 positions. So that's actually a big job, and if it's done right, it can require, as we all know, many, many hours a day. But I still think that the 2-year term is the best way to go for this. But there are other issues in this document that bump into the 4-year term. One is, let's see, I think it's section, where my trademark 2 pairs of glasses here, if you'll excuse me. Section 311. This would be the reducing by 1/3 the amount of electors needed to force a referenda during a 30-day period after an item is voted up on the agenda, going from 15% down to 10. It's my understanding that this ties into state statutes, and I'll defer to Rick or Les on this, but the idea would be that if there was a referendum forced, in some likelihood they might have to wait for the next municipal election or the next regularly scheduled election to bring that referenda up. And if we went to a 4-year term, I wonder if somebody might have to wait 2, 3, 4, or even perhaps over 4 years for that to come into play. So I'd like those questions answered before we vote on this tonight. And again, I'll defer to Corporation Counsel, the Mayor's Office, whatever. But I would be more comfortable instead of breaking up the questions, sending it back. The Charter Revision Commission is here tonight. They heard testimony. They have a pretty good idea where the city is on this. I would be more comfortable instead of separating the 2 questions, simply making a recommendation to them to reevaluate the 4-year term. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I just address that?
We often have had referendum that have taken place outside the normal municipal election cycle. We have used under my administration the presidential preference primaries. They're a great vehicle because you got everybody together and you got all the checking people. And we've had referendums on those days. We've done them on state elections that happened as well. And we've called special referendum days where we didn't align with any particular election, but we just opened the polls and had the election. So I don't necessarily see an impact there in terms of being able to do referenda on specific items. There's plenty of flexibility to be able to do that, and by no means these charter changes would prohibit you from scheduling a referendum at any date or time about that.
If I could follow up, what would be the maximum? Let's say that there was a conflict between the legislative and the administrative, and somebody didn't want this to go to referendum. What's the actual maximum? The state then steps in and says you have to do this now. Sure, you could do one whenever you wanted to, but how long could you wait? Does it have to be the next scheduled municipal election? Could you not have it at all?
The statute says that when the petition is successful, and frankly, there are a number of different statutes that this applies to, or that apply to this, and they indicate that you will schedule the referendum for the next regularly scheduled election or a special city meeting. And I don't think that there's a general deadline that's applicable to all referenda.
Thank you, Mr. President. I initially did support the 4-year term, and I'm going to tell you why. I did speak in front of the Charter Revision, and it was because I felt like it is expensive for us to run every 2 years, and if it was every 4, it would open the opportunity for other people to be able to run for this office who may not have been able to financially hold the burden, and that was my initial thought. Since then, since this has hit the paper, and I do get calls from my constituents about, they really are more in favor of a 2-year term. I will be more than willing to listen to what my constituents say, and if that's what the decision is in the city, I will completely back it up.
Any other comments on this? The motion, do you have the motion?
Recommend to terms of office for 2 years.
I just had one comment if I could. Mr. Caltrino? Well, it's already been seconded, and we were all just under discussion. But what I just wanted to say was that I followed Charter Revisions Commission process on this, and I'm caught between both. I would like to see a 4-year term for several reasons, and I think there's some good arguments as to why a 2-year term also works. But I will tell you, as one of the gentlemen that said here tonight was about splitting the question and putting it out to the voters and let them decide, was this is the people of Danbury's charter. This is their constitution, not ours. And although we're members of the city, I think that it is an item that, if it's this controversial, should be split out, and it should be voted on in November by the public, and let them make the decision on this. I think they have the right to do that. So I will be supporting the 4-year term. I'll be supporting a 4-year term if and when a motion makes it to that point.
Mr. Arcani?
Thank you. Mr. President, I just want to get this straight for myself. If I was to vote no, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm supporting a 4-year term. It's just that I want the voters to have it to say in this.
Well, what will happen is if you vote no, you'll
vote no, then we have
the majority votes no.
You'd have to have another motion.
Mr. Perkins' motion will fail, and then another motion will have to be made to make a recommendation of what you want to do with a 2 or 4-year term, and then we would take that up under discussion.
Point of order, we don't actually need another motion for that. We can just not have a motion.
But I don't think that we're going to move from this point without somebody making another motion, because we have no direction to give the Charter Revision Commission.
Again, on the point where I don't think we have we're targeted to split this document tonight. Is that correct? Don't we have to do that at the next? We can? I'm sorry. We can recommend that they split that? That's right. Okay.
Recommend they split it, and then have us have a vote and bring it to the people.
Bear in mind what's going to happen is that in the end, the Charter Revision Commission is going to give you a final document, and the call on how many questions to split that into, that's strictly yours. I mean, well, you can have a sense of it tonight, but it's frankly to save you the labor that's involved in considering it in detail and in depth at some later date.
In other words, Mr. Rebello, you could recommend them to Mr. Perkins is a voice on the floor, so she conduct a vote on that. But assuming that were to pass that issue, if it were to not pass, and Mr. Arcani wants to make a motion to recommend to the Charter Revision Commission in the final draft to have a split question based on that, do you want a 4-year term? No. You could do that tonight. That issue, as Mr. Gottschalk says, is now off the table, and that'll be reflected in the final draft report. That's basically.
I thought that was solely our purview, but that's.
Well, you're given that direction, and when that report comes back, you could absolutely move to merge it back together if you want.
Mr. Levy?
Through the chair of the Corporation Council, so I have an understanding. When it comes to dividing questions, when we finally adopt an ordinance, in the ordinance that we adopt as a body in full session, we can, at that time, designate what gets divided. The Charter Revision Commission is only making recommendations on the substance of the charter, not how it's presented or if it is presented to the public at all. Is that correct?
Charter Revision Commission is going to give you a document, it's called a draft report, and it's going to contain the various sections of the charter that they propose to you for amendment. What you do with it is your call. You can reject the whole thing, you can accept certain parts of it, and of those parts that are accepted, you can choose to forward them to a vote of the people at some time within the next 15 months in a dozen questions. Also, by the way, if you reject any of the provisions of the final report, there's an opportunity for the public to, as unlikely as it seems, get a petition drive together to add them back.
Okay, anything else on Mr. Perkins' main motion? If not, I'll try your minds. A yes vote to Mr. Perkins' motion would be to recommend to the Charter Revision Commission that they come back with a recommendation to us for 2-year terms. A no would defeat that. Try your minds. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, well, the ayes, and all those against, go to a roll call vote.
Ham? No. Megaseth? No. Hallis?
No.
Trombetta?
Yes.
Calendino?
Yes.
Perkins?
Yes.
Yes.
Visconti? Chianese?
Yes.
Esposito?
Yes.
Sadi?
Yes.
Cavo?
No.
Rutello?
Yes.
Diggs? Yes. Teichels? Yes. Orkanti?
No.
Curran?
No.
Knapp? Absent. Levy?
Yes.
Riley? Seabury?
No.
Stanley? Yes.
Motion passes by 12 to 7. Next item.
Just a point of, can you just provide the council changes for the behavior? Just provide 4-year term city clerk council, if any changes, we can just go right down the line. So we're not jumping all over that.
Did bonding happen to be number 1? No, it didn't. Or the 4-year term happen to be? Okay. City clerk position. City clerk position next. What's your pleasure, Council? Mr. Sadi?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've stated my concerns about this proposed change, and while I do agree that there does need to be a change here, that it should no longer be an elected position, and that it should be an appointed legislative assistant to the council, I think the appointment should be made by the council president, and it should be an individual who is chosen, I think as several speakers have addressed and others have talked about, from a list of individuals who scored a certain level on the civil service test. And not only that, but that once the person is appointed, to avoid political issues, that they cannot be removed except for cause, and that then there would only be another one appointed if that person either retired, left for cause, or otherwise. I understand some of the concerns with regard to managing that department and having a hierarchy, but I think that in watching other legislative bodies and watching elected officials and clerks that support that legislative body, that those issues are worked through every day. Also, with regard to the city clerk's position, I don't agree with removal of section 3.3, which is appointment of support staff, which is done seldomly, or to a minimal amount, both because of budgetary reasons and also because of just the hours that are needed or not needed from time to time. That being said, and maintaining a balance with regard to the legislative body having some control over its staff, I agree with the 2/3 needed to confirm that appointment. That'll make sure that you don't have a majority of 50% plus one simply controlling an appointment. I move that we recommend to the Council of the Whole to recommend to the Charter Revision Commission that the office of City Clerk, as is presented, let me try to make this motion very succinct, that the changes as proposed be changed as follows: that the appointment of legislative assistant be made by the Council President, and that the appointee must be someone who has been subjected to and passed and scored top 3 or 5, whatever the commission may choose, on that list, and that they may only be removed for cause.
Second.
Thanks.
Motion's been made and seconded. Under discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to interject, part of that motion may be in conflict with Municipal Employee Relations Act, as well as Civil Service Rules and Regulations, where we have a rule of 6. The motion was a rule of 3, so perhaps.
Is there whatever would be in compliance with the appropriate statutory regulation ordinances and union requirements.
Yeah, the number there, I think.
Right. But that, I would, from my motion, remove the number. The second would accept that?
Yes, I think although Perkins leaving, Joe, I think he's the second. But yeah, I'll accept.
Well, you were the original second. Mr. O'Donnell?
Thank you, Mr. President. I was and remain ambivalent about the elimination of the city clerk as an elected official. This has not been a burning desire with me. As you know or may not know, was on the original ad hoc that recommended the creation of the Charter Revision Commission in the first place. And most of my initial concerns had to do with the language buried inside the charter, the very policy wonk stuff. It didn't have much to do with the actual nuts and bolts of running the city. They had to do with the internal document and its internal or lack of internal logic. And this is not something that the CRC chose to address to any great extent. They went in a direction I did not foresee, which brought us to where we are tonight with the 4-year terms, the bonding limits, and the elimination of the city clerk and creation of a legislative position. But I'll accept the will of the commission and this body that the position needs to gain independence. The logic there escapes me a little bit because really nothing is more independent than an elected official. They sometimes don't even have to show up for work, and maybe that's a problem. I'm not casting any aspersions, but the idea, I guess, is to give the voters by proxy a little bit more direct control over the head of that office. Okay, having said that, it would seem to me that if we are serious about eliminating this position, this is a big deal. The city clerk has been a part of Danbury for generations. It may be a little confusing when people call 311, they want to get a merit certificate, and they're directed to the town clerk, but be that as it may, the city clerk has been an important and integral part of city government forever, at least the 1960s, when the town and city combined. So it would seem to me that if we're serious about taking this fairly drastic step, or radical step, and eliminating that position, we should be getting something in return for that. If we're going to lose the independence of an elected official vis-a-vis the direct connection to constituents, we should, as members of the council, to protect the council, have a little bit more say in the selection process, and also the elimination process. If you look at the language in the section, while it does require a 2/3 majority to validate the mayor's pick, the person essentially, after they have been appointed, serve at the pleasure of the mayor and can be fired at will. And this does not, if you were in that position and you were in a city where there is a healthy discourse between these two bodies, the administrative and the legislative, and you were ostensibly working for one of those bodies, but your essentially employment history was controlled by the other, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to assume that the person in their own vested self-interest might lean away from one and towards another. So I agree with Councilman Sadi's recommendation. I think that we can leave the details to the Commission and the Corporation Council, but I think the will of this council should take this motion very seriously. This is our staff we're talking about. We're not talking about the mayor's chief of staff or somebody that's working downstairs. We're talking about our own staff. And I think that if we're going to liaise with our own staff, we should be pretty sure we're comfortable with this person and have some control over their employment history. Thank you.
Thank you.
I too agree. This is a good step in streamlining government, which is a primary function of the Charter Revision Commission, is to bring it so so that it streamlines it for the people, operates better for the people. And the volunteers that serve on the Common Council need someone that is free from the pressures, the political pressures that exist. Civil service does that as well as having a dedicated individual to help the council members do their research on ad hoc committees and various issues. So that I think it's a good step. I'm not sure, I need a little clarification, excuse me. In the charter as it exists now, the council also had the opportunity to hire additional staff as well. I would, along with the administrative assistant being hired by the council president, approved by the council by 2/3 vote, I just wonder if that could be added to that recommendation, or did I understand Mr. Sadi's original proposal to include that?
Just to clarify, if I may, in response without taking my time to speak, it wasn't part of my discussion, but it was not in my motion, and with the indulgence of the second to the motion, I would incorporate the recommendation that section 3.3 remain as part of my motion.
And if I may continue.
The second agrees to it.
Yes, I do.
And the rationale there is that, we have people that get sick and they need replacements at times, and that can be a problem. So that the president should have the authority to bring in temporary assistants or whatever that case may be, or even have a full-time temporary assistant to the administrative assistant in the event something major should happen, because the historical continuity of the operation of the council rests in the full-time employees. And I know we come in as elected officials and think we can really set the world on fire, but our reliance really is on the paid staff telling us how, when we should notice a public hearing and all of that type of thing. And we should protect our interests in behalf of the citizens to do that. So I'm in favor of the council appointing its own assistant, as well as having additional staff if necessary to cover that area. I understand some of the mayor's rationale, but this is almost like, how would he like me to fire his secretary? This is the Common Council's only individual that works directly for the Common Council, and I think that it would be undermining ourselves to vote against this. Thank you.
Mr. Melton? Very quickly, there are a couple of points I just want to address. First of all, there's nothing in the proposed language by the commission that does not preclude the council from hiring additional staff. Even though it was taken out, there was a very pointed discussion at the Charter Revision Commission that said you certainly can budget for more, you could add more during the budget process, particularly as the city grows, you may need 1, 2, or 3. So whether you add the language now in or out really won't make a difference. The option is always there for the council to do that. I will say also that you cannot arbitrarily fire people in public service. Just because the language says the mayor shall appoint and may remove, doesn't mean you can walk in tomorrow and say, hi, I don't like you, you're fired. Employees have rights. They have more rights than you can possibly imagine, because I go through this every day. And I think you can count on the number of, on my hand, the number of people we've been able to terminate for cause, let alone whether or not it's not for cause. So the layer of protection is always there with somebody, and this image of sort of any mayor coming in and saying, well, you're out of here, you're fired, simply just isn't the case. You just can't fire somebody without having cause. That person has due process rights. They have all kinds of rights before the Connecticut Department of Labor, et cetera, and we deal with them every day. And then finally, the third issue is that on this issue, there is a challenge for us in the sense that there is nobody on site to manage the employee, no matter how good you pick somebody. And we've had situations in the past where we've had runaway employees that really answered to no one.
And unfortunately, I'm the one in the building, or my predecessor, or the one before me or after me is the one in the building that has to deal with whether or not the office is open or not, whether or not the proper documents are available, whether or not they're getting the services they need on a daily basis. So the intent here was not to usurp the authority of the council. And let's not forget that the mayor, this isn't Congress where we have, separate legislative body, separate executive body. The mayor is the presiding officer of the council. There's a reason why the framers of the charter crafted it that way. It's almost like a hybrid system because in some towns the mayor doesn't participate in the council meetings. And, Brookfield, where the mayor or the first selectman runs the legislative body, it's completely different. So the idea here was to create another sort of hybrid system to provide some hierarchy within the building as to who is responsive and answerable to whom. And certainly the council can add staff if they feel that necessary. As the city grows and they need more services, or maybe they want somebody just for constituent service, they can certainly add that. They can find the money. Nowadays it's a little tough, but it could be done if you want to do it.
A point of order. I believe there's other sections in the charter that prohibit the hiring other than yourself as mayor or the mayor, and that the exception contained within the charter references that point, so that it must be contained within the charter in order for the council to go upon itself and hire anybody. They just can't offer.
Oh, no, right. I want to be clear about that. You're absolutely right. You can appropriate the funding to hire
We
somebody.
can't hire anybody. You're the primary source of hiring.
Well, correct, and certainly if the council's will was to fund an extra position in there, you could do that without the language, or you can add the language in and have the implied powers go through. Either way, it really wouldn't make a difference. But I know that the commission looked at that issue, and there was a lot of discussion about whether you might need extra help in there. You may not be able to get the job done with just one person, and particularly as the city grows. But the real rationale here was, again, to provide a hierarchy within the building so that there's responsiveness when there's an issue, whether it's elected and under the old system, that frankly was not the case, and that was problematic. And let me just say that the civil service is certainly a good vehicle to be able to do that. There's no problem in promulgating a test and having folks come in and take a test and selecting from the top 6. Present the person for appointment, appoint an ad hoc committee to interview the person, then make a full recommendation. A 2/3 vote of the council is a very high standard to meet on anybody. So they're really going to have to know this stuff, and they're going to have to be well-trained and ready to go. So I just want to share what the logic was.
Mr. Seabury?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just clarification for me. If, according to the recommendation of the Charter Commission, this position would be appointed by the mayor. I guess this question to you, Mayor Brown. When this person would be appointed by yourself, would they be answering to the council president, or would it be answering to the mayor?
That is a age-old question.
That's why I want to bring it up
history in there. I don't know if you want to know.
I know that's why I want some clarification.
Okay. The objective would be on a day-to-day basis of running the office. They're there on time. The office is open, servicing the public. That would be a function of the mayor. On council business, that would be a function of the council president. So there would be, that person would serve as a conduit between the mayor, who oftentimes places items on the agenda, who oftentimes works very closely with the city clerk to get notifications out to you folks and all that other stuff, and the council president, as well as the council at large, who may need assistance with other work or whatever the issue might be, constituent service, etc.
So would that be listed in the job description, sir?
It absolutely would. The day-to-day reporting would be to the chief administrator of the building, and the common council business reporting would be to the council president.
Thank you.
Mr. Shani?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The sort of the template that the mayor laid out, where you want to make sure somebody's here on time, somebody as a civil servant needs to report, needs to not overextend their lunch, and those things, is absolutely correct. And what he just outlined here with regard to the council's business being a reportable matter to the council president and to the council by the legislative assistant is also correct. I still think that that can function with the appointment by the council president And I'll just leave it at that. I don't think those two contracts, I think they can be blended. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, we might as well do a roll call vote on this as well.
Could you repeat the motion?
After you repeat. Mr. Simon.
Well, one thing, and I did discuss it with Corporation Counsel, with Attorney Pinter, is that the way I changed the motion in a strict setting wouldn't have been appropriate, because this is a recommendation. Yes, normally there'd have to be an amendment to the motion, but as this is a recommendation, less formal, the motion, along with Mr. Levy's recommendation that was accepted by the second, is to accept the elimination of the position of city clerk and the establishment of a legislative assistant, but that legislative assistant be appointed by the council president, subject to all the union requirements, statutes, and ordinances.
Or you don't want to make that a union position?
Okay, the intent is to go appointed by the council president. The individual must pass the civil service exam and score within the appropriate number on that list, and may only be removed for cause, which is currently the case for civil servants. And then finally, to maintain section 3.3, which is the appointment of additional staff as needed.
Mr. Calendino?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You may want to include non-union position in that. You have to do the trick.
Well, you know, the problem we're going to have is the union's going to make a play for that position. So that's why it really should be a mayoral appointee, because once you take that out of the appointed position, the council appointment, they're very well come in and want to make a play for the position. And there'll be not a lot we can do about it.
Mr. Visconti?
Thank you, Mr. President. I think Councilman Sadi has the right idea and everything, but I think the mayor also has a point that we may not want this person to be a union, to get involved with the union, and maybe perhaps that's something we need to take a look at. That's how we can get, if we can get around that part of it. Thank you.
One question myself to Corporation Counsel or to the mayor's office. If the test is run civil service, would that automatically head the person towards the direction of being a member of the union just by nature of the process of hiring?
I think that I think what will happen is we'll end up having to negotiate over that position, whether or not, that's, again, the reason why we wanted to leave it as a mayoral appointee with confirmation by the council at a 2/3 level. Because, and testing is not necessarily a problem. You could set up we could set up our own testing methodology, even if we wanted to have an ad hoc committee serve as a test to do final interviews or however, then make a recommendation to the full council as a whole, under my letter as the final recommendation under my appointment. But my concern is that by taking the appointing authority away from the mayor, even through a tested process, very well could end up placing this position in the union. It'll be scored, and then there's a whole other set of rules that apply to the employment. And I don't know if I think it's no disrespect to our unions, they're terrific, but there's a flexibility here, night meetings, things like that you're going to need out of that position that are going to become problematic. That was why we left it as an appointed position.
Thank you, Mayor Bellman. Mr. Wittall?
We've been discussing this for about 15 minutes, and my guess is the Charter Revision Commission has been battling this particular issue back and forth for several months. I know that back in August, or maybe even before that, June or July, this came up, and it's been on the minds of a lot of electors in Danbury for many, many years. Can I assume, and I'll put this question out to Rick, can I assume that they have been advised on several of these processes, eliminate the first step is to make a decision to eliminate the city clerk. You've now done that, and the next step is, what are we going to do now?
How are we going to replace that position? So now you have many meetings or discussions or advice from the administration and corporation council how you can actually go about filling that position. It may be that this motion jumped the gun. I mean, I seconded the motion, but from what I'm hearing, it sounds like we have to come up with in several minutes something that they grappled with for several months. And I would be, if I'm not going to ask the councilman to withdraw the motion, but I would be comfortable sending this back to the Charter Revision Commission to come up with a structure that allows the council to make this selection with mayoral input, but with more input from the council than we have now, but satisfy the issues that the mayor has vis-a-vis unions and things like that. And my guess is that they've probably already determined some of this, or you have some idea where we're going. I'm not all that comfortable dictating to you guys tonight, right now, on the spot, how you have to fill this position. But I'm sure the information's out there, and then what do we have, 10 or 15 days to come up with it? They might be more apt to come up with something a little bit more appropriate and flexible. Because I keep hearing, we can't do this, and got to take that language out of the motion, you know. So, have a way at it.
The answer is that the Charter Revision Commission did explore various models and came up with this proposal. And once it became clear to me that this was the direction, it fit very comfortably into a mold that already existed. No civil service, mayoral appointment. At that point, I didn't need to explore issues of union representation. If, however, you're going to step into a completely different mold, many of these questions are going to come up, and they're going to come up for the first time. And I have, thank you very much for alerting me to the problems that I'm going to be facing, but I will take them very seriously.
What would be easier? Simply to recommend that the Charter Revision Commission revisits this issue, or accept Mr. Sadi's motion with a detailed explanation of how they're supposed to do that?
I don't think easier is really the right way to approach it. I think the more advice you can give, the more specific your recommendation, the happier the majority of you may be with the result that comes back to you. You don't have to make your recommendation specific, but then you leave open the possibility that you won't like what you get back.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sorry, I just wanted to mention.
I just want to share this with the council, whether it's myself, my predecessor, or subsequent mayor, we can never have a system or a situation again where a employee says, I'm not going to listen to you. I'm talking about day-to-day administrative matter. I'm not going to listen to you. I don't work for you. I work for the council president. That's a problem in trying to manage this building on a day-to-day basis. We can never go back to that system again. And that's really what the heart and the crux of this is all about. And it's not fair to a future mayor to put them into that position. Now, a lot of it depends on who you put in that position. I understand that. But maybe perhaps that Mr. Sadi might be onto something by promulgating the list via civil service will provide another layer, if I can work this out with the union, could provide another layer to ensure that really it's a civil service system that's making the appointment under the signatory of the mayor, with the obviously 2/3 vote by the council and all the other stuff that goes in there. But you just can't have a situation like we've had in the past where people say, I work for the council president, I don't work for you. I mean, it just doesn't work for us. And it won't work for me, it won't work for my predecessor, and it certainly won't work for a subsequent mayor. So it's just something to consider.
Thank you, Mayor Bowman. I will tell you all that when I went before the Charter Revision Commission, I had asked them to leave the city clerk's position alone. If they chose to rename it as a legislative assistant, that would be fine. But I saw both sides of this issue as being problematic, and I saw that, turning it over to the executive branch for appointment, I saw that as a problem as council president, and I saw also us appointing our own clerk as a problem through civil service and hiring rules. And what happens when a new council president comes on and has issues with the clerk that the previous council appointed. And who is going to want that job for a possible 2-year term or possibly less if they get hired midterm and get bumped out? So in the end, the process that the Charter Revision recommended seemed to me to be the best at the time. I can totally understand what Mr. Sadi is saying, and I totally believe that the clerk is the clerk of the council and shall and will be the clerk of the council, and especially if it's appointed by the council with a 2/3 majority vote. So I will tell you that I'm not too sure of which side I was happy with. I preferred the clerk being appointed, elected by the voters of the public. And but tonight I'm sitting here and I like Mr. Sadi's motion to some extent. I like the Charter Revisions Commission report and recommendation to some extent. So I will tell you it's been a very difficult decision for me, but I think that in the end when it comes down to it, I think the appointment by the mayor's office would probably be the most logical because of the direct supervision that the mayor's office could have that I as president can't provide because I'm not here in the building. This is a total volunteer position for me, and I have a full-time job. And so someone has to make sure that the office is open and that the person is there and lunch hours aren't being overextended and the work's being done. And I will, in that situation, will make sure that the clerk is working for the council. And that would be my job as president. Mr. Visconti?
Could we just have the motion read one more time so we know what's going on here?
To accept the elimination of the city clerk and establish legislative assistant appointment by council president with a civil service exam, and then remove for cause and to maintain 3.3. I missed a little part of yours.
As a follow-up, if this motion were to pass, it then gets, I'm sorry. If we were to pass this motion this evening on a vote, that motion would then be sent back to the Charter Revision Commission for them to work on. Am I correct?
Correct. The way I understand it, yes.
It's a pretty specific motion that Mr. Sadi made. It wasn't what you wanted. It was actually recommendation.
This is a point of order through the chair to Corporation Council. Notwithstanding the specificity of a motion, the Charter Revision Commission can do with it what it wants, correct? Thank you.
The commission can reject your recommendation.
So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gatto. Mr. Sadi?
I'm not withdrawing my motion, but as we're discussing this, I can see the members of the Charter Revision Commission very diligently, and I don't mean that pejoratively, you guys are doing it, writing down a lot of notes here. And the reason I asked that question, the point of order, is that to the extent that one of our motions in this deliberative process up here on a very substantive document doesn't make sense, it runs into legal roadblocks, Corporation Council and others, or counsel to the commission, will advise them and they'll craft and fashion something, hopefully, that addresses those concerns. So, well, the specificity of a motion is for the purpose of communicating a desire. What I meant by sort of, and I said this informally to Councilman Visconti, sort of chewing on it, they'll flesh that out as best they can within the legal parameters, and if something is incorrect, they're going to come back with it. If they don't like it, they might come back with a completely opposite position. It is a recommendation, and I absolutely understand, as I said before, the issue of administering the day-to-day operation of that person, punching in, punching out, figuratively, not literally. But the intent here, and also the concern of somebody being released or terminated because of a change of council presidents, well, a mayor's change too. So the purpose would be to protect them generally, not just I don't think by having when the mayor appoints or the council president appoints, that protection's not necessarily there, and the intent would be to have some sort of sustainment of that position unless there's a reason to remove it, and as the mayor outlined, it's very difficult to reach that burden. I'll close my mouth now. Thank you.
You know, ceding control of our staff does not sit well with me. With all due respect to the mayor and this idea that he has to a liaison with our staff. It is our staff. It's not his staff. We would hope that any person that was hired under appropriate circumstances would naturally want to work with the mayor. But we need control of our own staff. And I think that Councilman Sadi's idea was correct in that this is a recommendation to the Charter Revision Commission. They are right here. They are listening to everything that we're saying, and they are very attentive. And I think we ought to let them take a whack at it. We will, by the way, just to remind you, get to vote on this again. This is not the be-all and end-all of this. We're going to send it to them for a recommendation. They will do what they need to do, what they feel they can do, I'm sure in consultation with the administration and the Corporation Council, and it will come back to us for a final vote. I say let them have it. Thank you.
And just to that, I would just say that I totally agree, and like I said before, I think Mr. Sadi's motion has some great merits. I just think it's too specific. And I think it's laying it out too specific. And if it were to fail, I think we could come back with a less specific charge to the Charter Revision Commission to craft a legislative assistant position and how we could do that. And I would just, for one, would prefer to do that. On the question, any other discussion? We'll have a roll call vote.
No. Megaseth?
No.
Ellis?
No.
Trombetta?
No.
Caladrino?
No.
Perkins?
Yes.
Visconti?
Yes.
Genies?
Yes.
Esposito?
Yes.
Sadi?
Yes.
Cabo?
No.
Vitello?
Yes.
Diggs? Yes. Teichels? No. Arconti?
No.
Curran?
No.
Nat? Levy?
Yes.
Riley's not here. Seabury?
No.
And Stanley? No.
11 noes and 8 yeses. The motion fails.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to thank Mr. Ellis. I only told him this would only take like 10 minutes.
Would someone be interested in making a motion?
Save that's going to be tough, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Lee?
Are we ready for another?
We are ready for another, Mr. Lee.
I'll try to simplify this.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to see the Charter Revision Commission recommend a different number on the bond.
Oh, Mr. Lee, we were going to try to stay, if we could, on the city clerk to come up with
Well, then you just go over.
Yeah, I think Mr. Levy got fine. I don't think he does another.
Okay.
They got, maybe look at that a little bit.
Okay. That's fine.
We're going to move on to the non-referendum borrowing. Some $500,000, $250,000, $600,000, and the capital $500,000.
I'm sorry? Point of order. I thought earlier in this discussion, the informal understanding, we go through the list of proposed changes
Right. I'm sorry.
one by one, and then if there was discussion on that one, and if there wasn't, then we move on to the next one.
So we are moving on to...
Mr. Cheney is bringing that up.
Thank you, Chief. I'm sorry, I was on the page of the revisions. The next item would be City Council. Do you have there, Mr. Chief? On the item of City Council,
change name from the common council, Kinsman.
Well, it's actually section 2-6.
Section 2-6. We're talking about technical changes.
Right.
Some of us are working off a different document.
Okay, I'm sorry, yeah.
We're talking about technical changes next.
Okay, I have no comment.
Okay. So the next thing will be public speaking session.
No.
Which of this meeting you want to do? That's what I'm trying to figure out right now. Mr. Chief, I'm just going to kind of take a look at your background.
I'm sorry, I said
December 8th. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is city council. Okay, on city council. Is there any discussion on city council?
Point of order?
Changing name from common council, yes.
Mr. President?
Are we accepting motions for this, or are we just saying if there any concern, and if there's none, we're moving on?
No concern, we're just going to move on. All right, thank you. Any concern on item city council, changing name to common council? Mr. Perkins?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a point of order. Since some of the sections overlap, we'll just take into account that, for instance, 2.2 overlaps into parts of the city council.
Which parts are you referring to, Mr. Perkins? Change length of term and change name?
Just length of term so far is my question. Since that's already been recommended to...
Right, we're just going to take up the change name at this juncture, since the 4-year term has already been taken up.
Okay, thanks.
Does anybody have any issue with the change of the names? Okay, so we'll move on to technical changes. Took us all a while to get to that page, so tell us. Okay, anybody have any issues they want to bring up under technical changes? Okay. Mr. Chinis? That's where we were 5 minutes ago.
Under section 2-6 under vacancies, I know this has been brought up before, and it seems to be, we've been having issues regarding this section of the charter regarding 40 days, and now they extended it 60 days to try to accommodate that. But it still doesn't address the issue of violation of the charter. But the big issue, the last time we had this issue, was sending things to ad hoc and possible violation of this charter, and this section doesn't address that. So, for example, whether it's 40 days or 60 days, we can still have the same issues that we had just at the last council meeting or a year ago. This section doesn't address how to stop that from happening. Because, for example, we can have someone at the 59th day, and the council may have the right to send an ad hoc, and the same issues would be addressed. So my recommendation would be to the charter revision to try to revisit this, to try to address those concerns or the issues that we had at the last council meeting, to try to prevent something like that from happening in the future. For example, one of the recommendations we may have is shall be filled within 60 days, to have shall be submitted and named to the council within a certain period of time. That could avoid any charter violations if this council may have an issue with that appointment. I think that could be a way to avoid any embarrassment for the future or any potential charter violations. So I just want to make a recommendation to the charter to take a look at section 2-6 to try to prevent any future violations coming.
Okay, we have a motion and seconded by Mr. Rottello. Mr. Morano, did you want to address this?
If I could.
Please.
Yeah, one of the things we tried to do in this section was obviously extend time for filling vacancies and things, because you're having trouble meeting within 15 days. The state statute does create some problems. One of our questions to you would be,
What penalties do we give people? We can't send a mayor to his room. We can't put him in jail. So if you would, give us some ideas of sanctions that we might do, because quite frankly, we couldn't figure out what we might do in that circumstance. So what we try to do is give you more realistic timeframes to solve these problems, but we're just not sure what sanctions we could come up with. So if you've got some ideas, that would be helpful for us.
Follow up with Corporation Council, when it says in here, shall be filled within 60 days, if that was changed from shall, but a name shall be submitted to the council within 60 days, that way the council has some time to deliberate a name and so, and that way it won't be a violation if it does go to an ad hoc. Because once the name is submitted, we could do whatever we want. It wouldn't be a violation of the charter itself.
That would be true if the council decided to give itself additional flexibility, greater flexibility than the language is right now. That's one way to do it. There are obviously other ways, but that would be one way to give yourself some flexibility, some room to extend your time if you wanted to.
This is why my motion was to allow the charter division to look into this again with assistance. If you have ideas from Corporation Council to prevent any future violations from
I might be able to shed a little clarity, I think, to the chairman, Mr. Morano. The issue that came up is Corporation Council explained to us a potential penalty for failure to act on an appointment within the recommended time or the required time of 40 days, which was that could possibly be interpreted to mean that that seat would have to remain vacant until the next election. And not to speak for Councilman Cheney's, but maybe as simple as that failure to comport with this provision will result in vacancy in that seat until the next general municipal election. And hopefully it will not be 4 years. Because even if you shall submit something and I was just thinking about this, within 30 days, what if you don't? We again run into the problem of what happens. And then we all have to run and look at cases and common law and try to figure that out. So that's the issue. I don't want to, this should not be dictated as much as just that's the issue that came up, and I think that's what the councilman is concerned about. It's not a penalty as much as it is what happens if you don't do this. Cause and effect. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mr. President. I think Ben's motion neatly sidesteps the issue of penalties. Frankly, it's just a lot easier to submit a name than it actually is during a period of great contention to approve that or appoint that name. So if the Section 2.6 does not specify that the position must be filled, by not filling that position, you don't run into the wall of penalty. Frankly, with Corporation Council's ruling of last month, I find it hard to believe that the State Supreme Court would recommend as a remedy for failure to follow this previous process, previous to revision, the remedy would be the disenfranchisement of an entire ward. I was shocked at that ruling. I mean, the Corporation Council seemed to say, if you don't do this, the State Supreme Court is going to say you can't do it, and if we were on a 4-year cycle like some of these other communities, it could mean that for 3.5 years, people are not represented, and I would be flabbergasted, and I would actually like to know if that's ever happened, and if it has, okay, fine, but I would find it very surprising. But again, Mr. Chinese's recommendation sidesteps that. They're not saying that we have to make the recommendation that we have to fill the seat. They're simply saying that you've got to submit a name. And we want to, and the other thing is about, we put a penalty in here, it comes up to minority-majority blocking. It becomes a really good strategy if you've got a 10-11 council and a vacancy comes up, that they can block that appointment by voting against it, letting it elapse, and then you're again disenfranchised for another 3.5 years, specifically now because we've actually included that penalty. So my advice to the Charter Revision Commission would be to simply reevaluate that and maybe substitute submit for fill
And in so doing, you could leave 60 or perhaps even roll back to 40. But this idea that we have to appoint and we institute penalties and we then give minorities or majorities a great tool to knock a couple of people out of a ward for years does not sit well with me. Thank you.
Mrs. Hammond?
Is there a motion on the floor?
There is.
Yeah. Just a point of order. Let me just restate my motion so it's more clearly, so we can all, it's a motion to recommend to the Charter Revision to determine a consequence for failure to comply with Section 2-6.
No, I'm not going to second that. I thought the motion was actually to substitute submit for fill. Thank you.
I believe for point of order, the clerks are confused. It is, Mr. Cheney can correct me if I'm wrong, his motion is to recommend the council as a whole recommend to the Charter Revision Commission to determine a penalty for failure to comply with Section 2-6. The penalty is not necessarily punitive, but a consequence of failure to comply. Is that clear? Thank you.
Stanley, did you have anything else you wanted to? Okay. What I would say at this juncture is that in my 5 years, almost 6 years on the council, this has only happened twice. The first time, we didn't knowingly violate the charter, and the key word there is knowingly. We didn't realize that we had a limit of 40 days. And after that incident happened, we realized that there was a 40-day time limit on that, and we acted on that 40-day time limit according to the charter. So I would say that for the 2 times that this has happened, I don't know that it's that big of a deal. I agree with the Charter Revision Commission pushing it out to 60 days just to give us more opportunity to vet out a candidate. And I would just, me personally, I would just leave it at that recommendation.
Mr. Stein?
I'm simply trying to codify into law Corporation Council's opinion from the last council meeting. Thank you.
As a point of information, at Mr. Levy's request last time, our office has provided a written opinion today to Mr. Levy, which you'll see, which addresses what we believe is the answer to that issue that was so perplexing last time, but it's an answer that's framed upon the existing language. It doesn't really address any changes like you're suggesting, Mr. Chianese, but it does address, it gives a legal answer, provides you a legal answer to the question that was on the table last week.
Are we ready to vote on this? Did we do a roll call vote as well? We're ready.
McMahon?
Yes.
Megersa?
No.
Hallis?
No.
Trombetta?
No.
Caladrino? Perkins?
Yes.
Visconti?
Yes.
Chianese?
Yes.
Esposito?
Yes.
Sabi?
Yes.
Cavo?
No.
Rotella?
No.
Diggs? Teichels? Oh,
Not feeling well.
Arconti?
No.
Curran?
No.
Yeah, right here. Levy?
No.
Farley's down. Seabury?
No.
Stanley?
No.
Six. 12-6, the motion fails. Okay, moving on.
Can we make another motion? Can I make a suggestion before Facility speaks? Is there not consensus on the majority of those items that are on there, and can you just focus in on the key ones that are?
Well, that's what we're doing, Your Honor. We're trying to take it down. If there are no issues, if someone doesn't have a burning issue with something, we're moving on through it.
Okay. I just wanted to make a motion on that same issue, but more general, that the Charter Revision Commission revisit.
Well, I think they will be doing that, Mr. Levy, based on what we did with the city clerk as
So
well.
why are we making all these recommendations? Why don't we just make a carte blanche for each other?
I will second that motion, and I also refer back to the council, I said that would be an appropriate motion.
Okay, so Mr. Levy, we'll entertain your motion, we'll entertain Mr. Rotella's second, but you need to make it first.
Okay, recommend that the Charter Revision Commission revisit the issue of replacement of council members and the vacancies and the time length.
Perfect. I'll second that myself. Okay, under discussion? Seeing none, I'll try your minds. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Okay. Let's move on. Public speaking session. Anybody?
I'm sorry. Are you clear that if you make no recommendation, that the commission is not at liberty to decide to review a section on its own? You're clear. Okay.
Mr. Corporation Counsel, also to the chair, just a question. There is nothing that compels the Charter Revision Commission to accept any of our recommendations, only to revisit and alter.
That's correct. There's nothing that compels the commission to agree with you. They can accept or reject a recommendation, and I've just indicated to you that the recommendation can be general or specific.
So that we don't really have to be that specific, only have to identify the areas of concern.
I think that's fair. I'm going to advise the commission that there's play in the joints, and that if they want to have a conversation about an area that was of concern to you, that they can do that.
Mr. Sadi?
Are we on public speaking session?
We were moving to public speaking session. Yes, Mr. Sadi. Yes, it was unanimous.
Under public speaking, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Sadi, please proceed.
Move that we recommend to the council as a whole to recommend to the Charter Revision Commission that we remove the language authorized representatives and maintain that section as it currently stands in the current charter.
Motion's been made and seconded. Under discussion.
Yeah, if I can just, Mr. Chairman, there are two things in this section. One is to allow the presiding officer leeway in a 30-minute time period. The other is authorized representatives. Mr. Sadi, is your motion to eliminate both?
No, my motion is specifically as stated, and without opining on the others, it remains.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can I just make one thing as an ex officio member of this committee? Perhaps, I don't do objections to the representative thing because I don't want the lawyer up here pontificating for 45 minutes, but we have had situations where we've had an elderly resident who brought in a brother or father. We want to, maybe there could be some language that gives some latitude towards the chair of the council to allow that to happen without necessarily using language like authorized representatives. I was adjusting, I can hear them saying, oh, Jesus over here, so I know what's going on. But we have had situations where people could not speak or were afraid to speak and brought a relative. Who happens to be a lawyer if you're going to tell us? I don't know. I'm just, that's all I'm saying. They both know on the issue, they'll look at it.
Mr. Arcon?
Yeah, there's nothing in the charter, correct me if I'm wrong, that excludes an authorized representative who happens to be local. The charter speaks on one thing. You have to be either a resident or taxpayer. So if you wanted someone to speak for you and they happen to be this high-powered, windy attorney from Danbury, they could. If they were able to translate for, I'm sort of making light of this, is getting a little late, but there's nothing in here that prevents a representative from speaking. The only thing by sending this back and punting it back, we would eliminate a non-local authorized representative. There's nothing in the charter that prevents local authorized representatives. So if anybody up here is concerned that there may be a person with trouble with language or hearing or mobility or issues like that, there are 75,000 people in Danbury. We could probably pick one of them to be a representative. Correct? Thank you.
Recommend to the council as a whole to recommend to the Charter Revision Commission that they remove authorized representatives and maintain section 3-4 as it stands in the current charter. Or currently as it stands in the charter, however the prose is. Keep things the way they are.
Everybody clear on that? Mr. Shai's motion is to remove only the authorized representative being able to speak before the council.
To clarify that, keep section 3-4 as it relates to that provision, not the discretion to be given to the council president on the 30 minutes. That remains.
Try your minds. Any other discussion? Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll try your minds. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Okay. We're moving on to referendum petition percentage. Okay, we'll move on to municipal donations. Mr. Cheese?
Thank you. Section 4-2, I think it was brought up this evening by a member of the public regarding this provision on the donations of $1,000. And the concern that he has, the concern that I'm going to raise now is, has the commission gave attention to what happens to the donations of someone who gives $900 every month. Now, there's nothing in here that said, and over time, that could be pretty substantial. And I know we get the report that the donation was made, but it's always after the fact. So I would like to make a recommendation to the council as a whole, to the charter, that a provision be added, that it's in the aggregate. Any donations $1,000 or more in the aggregate must come before the council for approval.
Annual act.
Annual aggregate.
Mr. Perkins, you seconded that? Okay. The motion was that the donation aggregate annually cannot exceed $1,000. Am I correct, Mr. Oh, okay, if it does exceed $1,000, it has to come annually, it does have to come back to the council. Okay. Everybody clear on that? Anything under discussion? Mr. Seabury?
Thank you, Mr. President. I got to tell you something. When we address, at our council meetings, when we address the donations, it doesn't take a lot of time. People are recognized for their $25 donation to the senior center or to some other thing. And it's on TV, and people around the city say, oh, geez, I didn't know they did that. I think it's a good thing. I think it's a healthy thing to recognize the fact that people are donating to their city. And I don't think it has to be $1,000 or $1,001. I think it's a good thing. I know.
Thank you. Yes, sure. Well, we're waiting for a statement, Mr. Simon. The paper's expired, and Mr. Seabury still has the floor at the time, so. Mr. Seabury, you may continue, thank you.
I would vote against this thing. Frankly, I don't have any objections to accepting donations of $5 or $100. I don't think it has to start at $1,000. So.
Thank you, Mr. Seabury. Through the from the chair to the Corporation Council. I believe in reading the Charter Revision's recommendations, I believe that there still has to be a report made to the council on the next regular monthly meeting. So I think, Mr. Schieber, the donations will still be reported to us. I think it's just the acceptance of them is what we're discussing here. Because that was one of the things that I had looked at as well in the Charter Revision. So, okay, Mr. Sadi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. They will be reported to the council, but they won't be voted on. And if Mr. Seabear's concern is a vote and an affirmative speaking on them, I don't think that'll happen. I think they would be just reported sort of in the aggregate as a say like a departmental report. So you wouldn't have the individual recognition, but that's not the issue that Councilman Chianese spoke to. And if you vote against this motion and it dies, you still have to come up with another motion to reject the Charter Revision Commission recommendations, which is that any donation, notwithstanding the aggregate of under $1,000, even if it's 10 $500 donations, would not come to the council. So what Councilman Chianese is proposing here is an annual cap of 1,000. So if somebody makes multiple donations, we'll hit that threshold and then it will come before us.
Any other discussion on Mr. Chianese's motion? Seeing none, I'll try your minds. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Okay. All right, we are on to administrative departmental titles updated. Mr. Chianese?
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a recommendation to the charter is regarding the administrative assistant. I think that was mentioned tonight, is to change it to chief of staff, because I think that was the term that has been used for a period of time now, chief of staff. I think that would probably be a better term. So I will refer to the mayor on that one.
I would only say that Mr. Shepard loves being called the administrative assistant. So I think it's really, Mike McLaughlin had the title of administrative assistant, and then he also liked chief of staff. The only thing about chief of staff is that it sort of implies that you have HR personnel function over the entire staff. And there were times early in my administration where I thought about having the director of personnel serve as chief of staff, because it's really where that function belongs. So I don't know if it's properly named, although the administrative assistant, typically within the office of the mayor, handles the individual staff members there. In other words, I don't get involved in the day-to-day operations of Wendy, for example, my executive secretary. Wayne does. So it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Wayne likes administrative assistant, Mike likes chief of staff. Flip a coin, whatever you guys want to do, I'm okay with.
Just to follow up to the mayor, I guess, do you feel that the administrative assistant is the proper term to be used in this day? Or do you think it could be recommended back to the charter to come up with another?
I will say this while we're on this subject, and since we're going to be here at 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't know, did you guys change the name for the secretarial position? Is the executive secretary still in the mayor's office?
We did not change it.
Is that in the charter at all? I think it is, right? No, it's not. Okay. Well, that's something we can do at the, so I mean, that really should be executive assistant, but I'll take care of that at my level. But what was your question again, Mr. Chianese?
Do you feel it's appropriate to have the charter revision to take a look at that to see if there's another appropriate name to make it more of a modern?
Yeah, sure. Yep. Okay, we'll have to take a look at it. Yes.
Make a recommendation to the council as a whole.
We have a broad consensus here, so I don't know if you have to move to do that, right? You okay with that?
Okay, so Mr. Chianese, what is your... Okay, and do we have a second on that? Mr. Rotello will second that. Under discussion, 4-2, no. No. 6-2. Under titles updated, right, Mr. Chianese? Yes. Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll try your minds. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Settlement of claims. Section 6-4. Oh, you did it. I was just waiting on. Mr. Sadi?
As it was explained to me, I understand the situation now with regard to the insurance coverage on this. These are smaller claims, and that the larger ones, even if there is a portion covered by insurance, such as the landfill type of things, those would still come to us, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes.
Okay, we're going to move on to capital budget procedure. Submission to council date change. Section 7-3. Seeing no discussion on that, we'll move on to emergency appropriations. Mr. Rattell?
Briefly, Corporation Council, this has come up a lot. There's supposed no limit on emergency appropriations. My phone's been ringing. I mean, people have been, I don't want to tell you what's wrong with people have been saying it's blue sky blank checks, and I'm telling them, look, emergency means something in the Connecticut statute, and you can't just make it an emergency by say so, like Fiat. Could you briefly back me up on this, if I can be backed up, or elucidate this a little bit, because about this one.
I think the answer depends on the credibility of the mayor and the common council of the city of Danbury. I'm going to guess that you're going to find lots of case law on the subject of what constitutes an emergency. I haven't done any research to give you that answer tonight on what the most recent case is, but, and I generally don't quote justices of the U.S. Supreme Court, but I know an emergency when I see it. And you're going to have to weigh in on whether or not it's an emergency. And I think that that is the best protection that the people of the city of Danbury have, and that's sufficient. Yeah, the change is to, in my opinion, codify what was intended by vague language that exists now. To say that you're going to go through a referendum procedure to deal with an emergency means it's not an emergency, because it's going to take you 2.5 months.
If I may, I would nevertheless support a cap with that kind of ambiguity, and we can set it as high as we want.
What will you do when there's an emergency that exceeds the cap?
Well, you know, we face this on a fairly regular basis when we bump up against shells and busts in the charter itself, and we move over a line.
I'm talking about an emergency that exceeds the millions of dollars that you will put as a limit.
We're going to get the millions of dollars if the cap's that high anyway. We can't just snap our fingers and get it. We can't bond it. I mean, this.
We have it in.
We can't get more than a couple of $1 million overnight.
You have at your disposal.
You know, our capacity to borrow is actually very significant, and you know, with appropriations to the council, we could do a note sale next week for $50 or $60 million. If we need it.
Well, and that was actually the number I was thinking of. So,
Mr. Moreno had his hand up. I'm just going to recognize him first. He wanted to. I was simply going to recommend if you want to just send this back to us, because I'm hearing that there's some discussion about to happen on bonding anyway, because you think the limit that's in here is too high. If you're going to send that back, send this back. Let us look at the whole thing again with the idea that the council really is looking for lower caps than what the commission came up with. This is clearly non-capped at this point, and maybe we can work on language that would make you feel better, or maybe that we actually have to put dollar limits in the emergency section. So I'd recommend, instead of struggling with it, send it all back to us, and we'll work on that.
I would make that.
Let me just, a little bit of history on emergencies. I was on this council at a time when we had to raise $4 million, actually $8 million, to close off the landfill. was an emergency. That's what we have a fund, I guess, I call it the fund balance, but currently we have immediate funds available of somewhere in the order of $26 million. Might be a little bit lower, I get that signal, but I just think that in the case of emergency, and I can't tell you what it's going to be. I don't think anybody here has a crystal ball. But when we have to act upon it, we're going to have to act upon it. There is accountability and reportability back to the public after you do something as immediate as that. An emergency to you may be one thing, an emergency to the mayor may be another. We all have our values, but I think that we've lived with this emergency portion of the city charter for many years. I actually never really had to use it because we have other instruments that we can do that with. So I really don't see any harm in leaving it as is. On the other issues of funding, then I would have some other questions.
Mr. Sadi?
Following Councilman Levy just said, the emergency situation, threatening lives, health, and property, 30, 40 years it's been in place. The only change here, if I'm correct, is that the language is clarifying that we don't have to basically spend everything in our fund balance, everything that we have in reserve before we could do this. We basically have to burn up dollars in our operating account, but then once we did that, if there was an emergency that threatened the lives, health, or property of citizens as determined by 2/3, then we could go forward. So it's the same provision that's been in place for many years. We're just clarifying the fact that we don't have to burn up every single penny we have in a fund balance. That would significantly impact our ability to borrow, as well as many other aspects of how the city is run. And through the chair of the Corporation Council, is that a proper explanation?
You refresh my recollection, and that's right on the money.
Thank you.
Okay. So we didn't have a motion on that. So we can just move on. Public improvement assessments. Expanded to include roads. Section 7-8 and 7-10. Anybody have any discussion? Mr. Cheese?
Section 7-8, I guess, deals with the public works, the improvements. Can we get a clarification, at least in the charter revision, what they meant by putting this in here? I think there's some confusion with the public saying, if the road going through, for example, the road gets paved, I'm going to have to pay for that pavement because that's my house, and I live on a dead end street.
This was all my fault. This did not come from the minds of the charter revision members. This is simply because we have an ordinance that permits you to assess benefits with respect to public improvement projects, just like you do with sewer and water now. And so we have these three ordinances dealing with sewer, water, and public improvements, and we have a charter section that just deals with sewer and water. It seemed logical to me to put what you've already acknowledged to be viable in terms of assessments in this charter section.
And it's current practice too.
So we already have this already?
It doesn't add anything to your existing power. It just seemed neater to me to do it this way. If you're still confused, I'm still answering.
So how does it, the public has it where if they get their road paved, they don't have to pay for it.
No.
That's what,
Only if they're specially benefited.
what does that mean?
It means that the value of their house increases differently as a result of this than values in town generally.
So what happens?
You do.
So what happens if it actually decreases your value? Where's that benefit? It's the other one.
This doesn't deal with that at all. And it wasn't intended to deal with paving. It wasn't intended specifically to deal with private roads. We had one, Nancy Drive, I think, maybe 10 years ago, and it was too mind-boggling to grapple with, and so you didn't use it. But that's what it's for. It's the possibility exists that you'll choose to fund a public improvement that is special in terms of its benefit in this way.
So just would it be better if it's just rewritten more cleaner, that it's more easily understood or not?
Perfectly.
But, I mean, this, from a layman's point of view, do you think it could be written cleaner where it wouldn't be misunderstood?
You could send it back to the Charter Revision Commission. But I want to just raise one thing while I'm standing up here. The commission worked for 16 months to come up with a product that you're looking at now. And you know, if they had the opportunity, I think they'd be more than willing, and maybe going out on a limb here, to work another 16 months. But the statutes don't give them that ability. You are going to be asking them tonight to take a look at the hottest topics on their plate and finish up in 3 weeks. So bear that in mind as the clock keeps ticking, that the clock is ticking for them too.
Mr. Perkins?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Gottrell, just clarification. So are you saying that if an improvement does come by a taxpayer's home, they are the ones who determine whether or not that has made an increase in value to their home?
No, I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm suggesting that the Common Council may choose to exercise rights that already are given to them in the Code of Ordinances of the City of Danbury to assess people for the cost of public improvements that benefit them specially. I'm going to make reference to Cannondale Drive because I know the Brooks are here. If you chose to accept that road, and in the context of the acceptance of that road, you chose to improve it, widen it, install drainage, and pave it, and the price tag came to $1 million. You could then go through the mental calculation to determine what part of that $1 million really is for them, as opposed to something that's for the public at large. And there would be no scientific method to what you came up with, but you might say it's 90% them and 10% everybody else is going to use Cannondale. And you could then choose to assess that 90% to all of those property owners on Cannondale. That's the way it might work. And they would, of course, come to the public hearing and say, don't you do that? And you might then decide not to.
I'll have your hand up next, then I'll get to you, Mr. Visconti, and then back to you, Mr. Cheney.
Would this apply, or could this apply to that little road that we built up at X-Bay?
Pocono.
Oh, yeah.
It could.
Okay. Let me just ask you something.
It could, but I think in that particular case, you would find that there would be, contrary to the case of Cannondale, everybody uses that. And so it'd be very difficult to assign a high percentage value to the people there.
The assessment would be more spread out.
It might be non-existent.
Can we do this now without this language?
Yes. You have 2-143.13 or something.
We don't need this, I mean, you know, I know you worked on this and
You don't need it.
we don't need
You don't
it. We
need
can do it
it.
without it.
Correct.
I would recommend, if I'm making a full motion, but I'm just saying, I would recommend we take it out. It seems to be causing agitation. It's not needed. It's not necessary.
If I were you, I'd make that motion.
I will make that motion.
Motion's been made to take the language out. Someone want to second it?
I did already.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Perkins.
Yes.
You're moving
the new language in 7 entry, with the exception of the city and public improvements. New language commencing with all costs of public works.
Okay, under discussion? Seeing none, I'll try your minds. All those in favor of removing the language from section 7-8 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Mr. Visconti.
There's always one in the crowd.
Actually, there's going to be two, so Mr. Campbell down for a negative as well. Okay, moving on. Borrowing, non-referendum borrowing increase to 2.5 million per project, annual cap of 5 million. Mr. Levy, you had...
I'll yield to
Mr. Seabury.
I would recommend that this section go back to the charter revision for another look.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded by Mr. Perkins. Mr. Perkins. Under discussion, Mr. Sadi?
Well, it's not part of the motion, just to express at least my intent under this, and there was a lot of discussion on this, including some of the mayor's comments, that the commission should look at it in the context of a per project cap of not more than $1 million, and then an annual cap of not more than $2.5 million, or what they so choose. But that's something that I know myself and other members have talked about now. Some of those numbers are similar to those numbers that are mentioned tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll try your minds. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstained? Mr. Curran's opposed. Please mark Mr. Curran as opposed. Conflicts of interest. Wording update, section 8-3. Seeing no discussion, I'll move on to periodic charter review. Mr. I think you're right.
I know there's no motion, but I'd like to...
Mr. Levy, you have a
Question on it?
Absolutely.
Okay. This is a periodic charter review. When you establish a 10-year review, does that prohibit frequent if you wanted to?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience, Mr. Sadi.
One thing I know, I'm sure everybody feels this way, and the mayor and others have said this. I hope the Charter Revision Commission members don't think we're beating on you guys here, beating you down, but I think we all really appreciate all the hours, and then all the hours we're going to put you through for the next 3 weeks, so thank you for all your work. And the attorneys as well. Can't forget the lawyers.
I would love to have one of you. Got it. Ready, second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.